So is he a man or a mouse? David Cameron did shift Kenneth Clarke from the Justice Department and Justine Greening from Transport, giving him scope for policy changes. But he left them both with a seat in the cabinet at the table. And when Ian Duncan Smith resisted a move from work and pensions, it was the Prime Minister who backed down. So a shift to the right, but not exactly the smack of firm leadership, as our political editor Gary Gibbon now reports.
As I say, it's a lovely day for a walk along Whitehall.
The new Justice Secretary, Chris Grayling, was one of the winners in the reshuffle. The new Conservative Party chairman, Grant Shapps, and Culture Secretary, Maria Miller, are part of the new generation the Prime Minister says he wants to bring on. But 1 week after a former minister suggested the Prime Minister was mouse-like, was this much-trailed reshuffle the work of a powerful king of his political jungle, or a mouse? Well, the Prime Minister told his Welfare Secretary, Ian Duncan Smith, he wanted him to leave his department and switch to justice. Ian Duncan Smith said no. The Prime Minister said, fair enough. David Cameron didn't throw Ken Clarke out of the cabinet altogether, but he did sack him from the Justice Ministry.
I'm rather pleasantly surprised. He's asked me to stay on the cabinet doing a different role, and some on the economy, some on the National Security Council.
There were promotions for right-wingers, including Owen Paterson, who moves to the Environment Department. One prominent climate change sceptic welcomed that appointment. And Chris Grayling at the Justice Department is expected to pursue much more hardline policies than Ken Clarke would have entertained. Right-wingers in the Conservative Party believe that their rebellions and attacks on David Cameron in recent months have pulled him to the right. Do you think he feels a bit of pressure, though, from the right? There have been a couple of serious rebellions, lots of voices off, yours included. Do you think you've nudged him in a certain direction collectively?
Well, that was what I hoped that I would achieve. Whether I have or not...
Well, with your colleagues, well, you know, false modesty aside, do you think you have nudged him, don't you?
Yes, I think we have. But whether David Cameron would say that, of course, is another matter.
I think it's a recognition by David Cameron that the right-of-centre mainstream of the party needs proper representation. The promotion of people like Owen Paterson and Chris Grayling is evidence of that.
Welcome back.
Nick Clegg's brought back David Laws as schools minister 2 years after he resigned from the cabinet over his expenses. One former leader of the Lib Dems said David Cameron had tried to buy off his right wing with jobs, and it wouldn't work.
The efforts which are being made, particularly in relation to Europe, and also in relation to justice, are designed to quieten some of the more rebellious spirits. But listen, we once paid Danegeld in this country. It didn't do us any good. The enemy kept coming back.
David Cameron did prize his Health Secretary, Andrew Lansley, out of his old job to make him leader of the House of Commons. It was something he'd long considered in private and rejected in public.
He knows more about the NHS than I think anyone in government, probably anyone in Parliament. He does a very good job. I want him to go on doing that job.
Well, not anymore. It's been given to Jeremy Hunt, former Culture Minister, who came under huge pressure to resign for connections with the Murdoch empire only a few months ago.
It's a huge task. It's the biggest privilege of my life. I'm incredibly honoured and very much looking forward to getting on with the job.
Justine Greening, opponent of the Heathrow third runway, was shifted from her transport job. London Mayor Boris Johnson said it was part of a government conspiracy to expand Heathrow. The new Transport Secretary, Patrick McLaughlin, is open-minded on the policy. His spokesman insisted coalition agreement opposition to Heathrow expansion remained government policy. Number 10 sold this reshuffle as quite a moment, the only big reshuffle David Cameron hopes to have in this Parliament. But he felt he only had enough political capital to fire 3 relatively unknown ministers from the cabinet: George Young, Cheryl Gillan and Caroline Spellman.
Really delighted. Can't wait to get started.
It's a big challenge.
Theresa Villiers, the new Northern Ireland Secretary. The number of women with full cabinet rank is down 1 to 4, making it more difficult for David Cameron to reach the 1/3 women ministers target he set himself for government. Number 10 made sure the first wave of junior ministers to walk up Downing Street were all women. There'll be many more junior appointments overnight and into tomorrow.
Gary Gibbon in Westminster. Well, a little earlier I spoke to the Home Secretary, Theresa May. I asked her whether Ian Duncan Smith was right to say no to a move from his department.
Ian has done a very good job at welfare in terms of the welfare reforms he's been putting through, and he will now stay there to carry those forward. I think what matters to most people, most members of the public in this country, is what those reforms are. And of course, putting a cap on welfare benefit and the other changes that he's making, the work programme, the tailored help to get people into employment. These are really significant aspects that Ian has introduced in the work that he's been doing, and obviously he will now take that forward.
But in that great test of whether the Prime Minister is a man or a mouse, with Ian Duncan Smith, he turned out to be a mouse, didn't he?
No, what has happened is that Ian will be staying on at work and pensions. As I say, I think what matters to the public is the reforms that Ian is putting in place.
Well, now, the right wing on the back benches are absolutely thrilled tonight. Are they right to be?
I don't think this reshuffle is about right versus left. What I think the reshuffle is about, it's about looking to the future, it's about building on our reforms. Yes, it's about focusing on delivery, but it's also about bringing forward the next generation. And I also think you will see when you look at the overall appointments that have been made, looking at those and looking at announcements the government has been and will be making, you will see our plans to ensure that the economy is competitive and to make Britain a country for people who work hard and want to get on.
But if you listed the three key figures there, Ian Duncan Smith, Owen Paterson, Chris Grayling, you're talking about three prize buttresses of the right.
Well, as I say, if you look across the package as a whole, this is not about right versus left. It is about looking to the future. It is about bringing on some of the next generation and, crucially, about building on our reforms and focusing on delivery. Now, this, the Prime Minister said at the beginning of the administration 2.5 years ago, he's the greenest government in history. But he's appointed as an Environment Secretary, Owen Paterson, who has a strong record of opposing wind farms. Although he's got good credentials on fish, when it comes to environmental issues affecting the environment in which we live, he's not so hot, is he? Now, I think Owen is going to be a very strong Minister Secretary of State in that department. I mean, he's got obviously a very good background across a number of the issues that the department deals with, and I think he will do an excellent job. Well, he may have a strong background. The problem is it's a background on one very strong side of the argument, and that is opposed to doing anything that might reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. No. First of all, there are a number of aspects to that particular portfolio. Owen has a strong background in a number of the issues that will be within that particular portfolio. And also, on the environmental side, he is committed, as the government is, to ensuring that we can deliver on the requirements that we have for sustainability for the future.